Hello and welcome to Enactus Business Journal. My name is Kailie Scarlett and I am your host for today's program titled The Journey to Normal U.S. Economic Update. I'm a student at the University of Findlay College of Business majoring in finance, and I am a member of the UF Enactus team. Here with us today we have Mr. Jeff Korzenik of Fifth Third Bank. Mr. Korzenik is Chief Investment Strategist for Fifth Third Bank, where he is responsible for the bank's overall client investment strategy. Mr. Korzenik is a 25-year industry veteran. His background includes research and management roles in some of the country's largest investment firms. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much.
All right, first off, why is it that we have the journey to normal?
Sure. We've been talking about this journey to normal as a path that the U.S. economy has to go on. We'd love to say that we can get there. It's not a journey, that we can get there right as a destination. But by saying journey to normal, we mean we have to go down a slow path towards getting back to normal economic conditions. And rather than being able to turn a switch and get there, we have to work off primarily all the excess indebtedness that the U.S. economy got to. So before we can go to a position, we define normal as a time when we go back to more robust U.S. growth, more like the 3.3% average GDP growth in the U.S., and we can do that and go back to that growth without any of the extraordinary support given by fiscal stimulus or monetary stimulus in the United States.
Okay, how has the shutdown affected your perspective of the economy?
Surprisingly little. At this point, with the shutdown not lasting terribly long, it's had very little economic impact. This is the 18th shutdown in what's sometimes termed the modern budgeting era post-1976. Most of the shutdowns had little consequence. Most of them didn't last terribly long. The longest was 21 days in 95 into early 96. That one is the one we tend to remember. Most are not as consequential. This particular shutdown has less economic impact simply because we have a greater percentage of the government still in operation than past shutdowns. And even the employees who have been furloughed, some have been called back, most notably by the Department of Defense. And we've also agreed as a government to pay them their back pay when it's over. So even their spending patterns aren't changing very dramatically.
That's true. I didn't think about.
Yeah. Now, I will say one thing that's different, and where this is getting everyone's attention, is that we're bumping into this thing called the debt ceiling, which is a limitation on how much money the U.S. Government can borrow. We spend at a deficit level, so we're spending more than we take in. So we have to continue that level of spending beyond the shutdown, we have to be able to issue new debt. We need a higher debt ceiling to do so. If we don't have that higher debt ceiling, we have a lot of really tough choices to make, including how do you pay interest off on the debt that's out there? How do you take care of Social Security and Medicare? And so that's why this one has gotten a lot of attention. To the degree this goes on, and we don't think it's going to go on much further, to the degree it goes on, we start to get deeper worries. We start to sap business confidence. We see decision makers putting off consuming spending. We see businesses putting off hiring. We see businesses putting off investing. So if it continues, it can have more of an impact, but to date, very little impact.
Now, since Boehner just announced that he thinks that they're going to raise the debt ceiling, do you think that's going to be better for the economy then?
It certainly alleviates this weight, and I think people will take this as yet another occasion of excess drama out of Washington. A lot of talk, a lot of worry, a lot of media fretting, and not a lot of change. And so I think this will help quite a bit.
How has this affected Fifth Third?
It's affected us very little. We have obviously done contingency planning, as most major firms have done in the event if it were to continue. We've had a lot of anxiety on our customer base. We've been working very hard to allay some of that and put this shutdown in historical perspective. To the degree we have projects or lending that's tied to government processing, some of that has slowed down and there's a little bit of a bottleneck, but nothing that has really affected us in any meaningful way as an institution.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
How has since this whole shutdown has gone from the Affordable Care Act, how do you see the Affordable Care Act affecting the health sector?
It's one of the big question marks, and this really hasn't had any impact directly on the Affordable Care Act, and it looks like in the negotiations it's probably unlikely to have much of an impact. The question still remains, what is the Affordable Care Act going to do for the economy? And we think this is still very much uncharted territory. Our expectation and early indications are that consumers are in for some unexpected and perhaps unpleasant surprises. For many consumers, healthcare might cost more than they anticipated. For some, it will cost less. For some, they'll find that their doctor is not in the new plan and network. So we're going through a lot of it. Obviously, the technology issues related to the healthcare exchanges have made a lot of headlines. We still have to work through those. So it's a little bit uncharted territory. We are thinking that some of it is likely to result near term in higher healthcare costs because you're simply putting new consumers into the system without really creating new supply of healthcare. Ultimately, we see some very good developments that will, after the initial jump in healthcare inflation, will help regulate that inflation. So there's very good developments that are coming out of it, but the initial impulse will be higher healthcare costs. That's going to hurt consumption in other areas, not in a dramatic way, but it's one of the things we're keeping a close eye on.
So as Fifth Third Bank, you're keeping a close eye on it
on behalf of our investors in particular, because it really does affect investments not just in the healthcare system, but to the degree that higher healthcare costs impact corporate earnings or impact households' ability to spend and invest. That has broad impact in the economy and implications for investors.
Could you give me some information on Fifth Third's private bank?
Sure. The private bank is a bank within a bank. It's here really to provide for the needs of roughly the top 1% of our customers. These tend to be wealthy individuals who have very specific needs and that we can service with a specialized team of credentialed experts. We have roughly $25 billion in assets that we manage in the group, but we also provide a whole host of trust and lending and cash management services as well, both to individuals and to institutions.
Okay. So has this approach been beneficial to Fifth Third?
Absolutely. We've actually been managing money for wealthy individuals for over 100 years.
Wow.
It's a big part of our history and culture, and it helps us target a group of clients that often we have other relationships to. Typically, many of our clients might be executives that we offer banking service to, or professionals, or it might be business owners for whom we've lent money to help them grow their business. So it's really all part of our broader financial relationship with very good clients.
So there's a lot of finance majors here at the University of Findlay, specifically people in the investments club. What are some tips that you can give these young investors?
Sure. There are a lot of ways to invest successfully. The key is sticking to a discipline, finding something that works and sticking to it, which sounds very easy.
Yeah.
But in practice can be quite challenging. That's probably the single most important factor: consistency and discipline in the investment approach. The other thing is, if you're going to embark on a career in the finance world, and particularly a career in investing, you have to be committed to being a lifelong student. There is not a week that goes by that I don't learn something new. After a quarter of a century in the business, to be able to still say that is a great thing, because I love learning, and most people in the investment world love learning, but it's also very humbling that after all these years, you still have so much to learn. So that's a commitment that I think people need to make to the industry.
Well, I think that's exciting too, getting to constantly learn things, keep your mind fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keeps your mind fresh, and certainly keeps you humble. You're always amazed in this business by how much you didn't know.
The global economy has been a rather wild ride these last couple of years, what with the U.S. debt crisis, sovereign crisis, and China's slowdown. What is your outlook on the global economy on a broad
It's a great
scale?
question. We think it's turned. If you look at where we were 1 year ago, Europe was slipping into a recession. China's growth was decelerating seemingly without end, and there was talk of a hard landing in China, and the U.S. just couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Today, that situation is very different. We see Europe exiting its recession, and elsewhere in the developed world, I'd add that Japan, which has not contributed to global growth in 25 years, is starting to contribute again. That's a big positive in the world economy. China, while we won't go back to the double-digit kind of growth rates that they had in their early years of development, they seem to be stabilizing their growth in this 7-8% year-over-year real GDP range, and they are getting more sustainable growth as they broaden out their economy and develop the interior and go through a couple of reforms. So we think that's a much better situation than a year ago. And then finally, here in the U.S., not only have we stabilized some of our growth, we now see some paths to accelerating that growth. And specifically in the U.S., we talk about the continued recovery in the housing market as the echo boom generation, the children of the baby boomers, go out and demand housing as they get work and move out of the house. We see manufacturing to some degree coming back to the United States. It's a lesser factor, but a meaningful one. And then perhaps most important over the long run, the energy boom in the United States, which has broad implications across the economy, across the transportation industries, across energy and infrastructure. We think that's going to be a tremendous advantage and a tremendous catalyst for growth in the United States.
Well, it's exciting that you think that the global economy is going up. That's always good to hear. We don't like to hear that it's going down.
No, especially as students are about to enter the workforce. It's very much on everyone's mind, and I understand that.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. We'd like to thank Jeff Korzenik of Fifth Third Bank for joining us today here at University of Findlay. Jeff, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
This is Kailie Scarlett. We're hoping that you will join us again next time for another episode of Enactus Business Journal. If any of you are interested in learning more about becoming a part of the University of Findlay College of Business Enactus program or of Investments Club, please email me at scarlettk@findlay.edu. Thank you for watching. This concludes our Enactus Business Journal program. Go Oilers!